Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervase Charmley, and this is another Worcestershire church. This is the church of St. John the Baptist, Crowle. Now we know that in the 1230s there was a church here, so that's the early 13th century. Probably there was one here before the Norman Conquest. It would have been a little wooden Anglo-Saxon building. It might have been quite grand in its carving and appearance, but it was wooden, and it was replaced probably around about the beginning of the 13th century with a stone church. That stone church in turn was replaced in the 15th century by a much grander building reflecting the then relative wealth and importance of the village, and the crowning glory of that building, and all that survives in fact of the 15th century, probably late 15th century addition to that in fact, is the West Tower. The whole of the rest of the building was pulled down and rebuilt on a grander scale, same floor plan but taller, in 1880, and the architect was Frederick Preedy. Although based in London at the time, he was born near Evesham in Worcestershire and was very much a local man, and Frederick Preedy is noted for his sympathetic rebuilding and restoration of churches, largely in Worcestershire and Warwickshire. There's a few in Gloucestershire as well, but mostly he worked in Worcestershire. He's notable, he's the only Victorian Gothic architect who made his own stained glass, and many of his buildings feature, of course, stained glass by him. As I say, this is predominantly a Victorian building, but there are some survivals, and one very important one from the inside of the old church, as well as the outside, the porch and the tower, and we'll see them when we go out. But let's have a look around the inside first. So here we are, as usual. We start at the west end, looking east. You see there the screen. Now, of course, the screen is Victorian, but it is very much reflects what would have been here in the Middle Ages. Behind me, so to turn around, this is the font, and this is 15th century. You see, carved with tracery and the like. These are some memorials that were in the old church. So you have George Farley, late of Henwick and Crowle, Esquire, died in 1793. So he was born in 1793, that makes more sense. Died in 1833, apparently. And so you've got here, this is Reverend Richard Harrison, who was for 32 years vicar of this parish, died in 1835. And then succeeded apparently by his son, also Richard, who was vicar of this parish for 30 years. No, rather his father was vicar. So again, you've got this confusing carving, but you have that succession, that dynasty. We have here the memorial to Duncan Athol Davison, died in 1966, Lieutenant Colonel of the Irish Fusiliers, Deputy Lieutenant of this county, and Churchwarden for 14 years. And so this is then moving east. Now, at the back here we have some old photographs, and here we have, this is the old church. You can see it, there's too much reflection there, and you can see it's a lower building, it's got dormer windows, and here we have the demolition. Can't quite see that, but that's demolition being pulled down, and this is this church before the rood screen was installed, so the screen is later. It's not part of the original setup, although it would have been intended, because that's what you did. Now, you'll have noticed, of course, that enormous stone lectern, while the base with its 4 columns is Victorian. The actual lectern itself is medieval. Quite impressive, I mean 13th century perhaps. Certainly there are some sort of Norman feeling to it. We have here, so of course we have the harvest raised in that collection for food bank. Pulpit, obviously not used very much these days. I suspect they tend to use the medieval lectern, and why wouldn't you? It's extremely unusual. There are very, very few like it, if any. We have the screen, and it's in broadly sort of 14th, 15th century style, but as I say, it is definitely, in fact, 19th century or even early 20th. Into the chancel, there are doors on the screen, which again is authentic. The organ, I suspect this is another Nicholson. Yes, it's a Nicholson. Nicholson being based in the county, so easier to get Nicholson. There we are looking west, and there behind that amazing medieval lectern. And that tower arch is of course medieval. The medieval church, the 15th century church, was cruciform. We have here, and the new church is on its footprint basically. And here's the east window. Now I don't think that's by Preedy, so I don't think there's any of his glass here. Reredos, we have this mosaic panel of the burial of, well, the women anointing the body of Christ for burial. The space behind the organ is going to be the vestry now, so this here, you've got the vestry in the south transept, and that's the chancel with these big choir stalls, obviously set up for a good choir, so from the lights and things. And then you have on the other side what's called the centenary vestry, which is not so much vestry really as it is not standard vestry, but it's used for things like it opened in 1982, and the centenary, of course, at the opening of the new church. And obviously it's used for storage these days, because that's why we've got 2 Christmas trees in there. The trouble with transepts, got the heating in here as well, and the sink. The trouble with transepts in the post-medieval era is what you do with them. Because yes, you can use them as side chapels if you so wish, but they can't really see everything you're supposed to see in the service, so they do end up like this as vestries. And one is the organ chamber, the other organ chamber with vestry behind, perhaps choir vestry, and then the clergy vestry. So that is the inside here at St John's, Crowle. The lectern in the early 13th century, and it's renewed in the 19th century with this base here. So yes, I'm rather pleased I hadn't seen there's a sign on the back saying when it's dry. I hadn't seen it and just looked at it and went, well, 13th century. So I'm not an expert on these things by any means. I've just seen a lot of them. And then we have the War Memorial here for the Second World War. Interestingly, 3 of them are RAF and only 1 of them is Army. So that is the inside here at Crowle. And so now we're outside at Crowle. You can see behind me this 15th century tower. This is the oldest part of the structure of the church, because the porch doesn't really count as structure, does it? The porch is just, particularly this one, is wooden. It's an appendage. And the rest is 1880 through 1882, and it opened in 1882 to great applause, and it's still in use today. So I'm going to go around the outside and particularly point out the salient features of the building. So there we go, there's the outside of the building. You can see there's that 14th century porch, and then above that beautiful tower, and that's almost checkerboard effect with the 2 different, or the multiple different shades of local sandstone is very, very beautiful. The rest of the building, as we've said, and as we've seen inside, is this Victorian rebuild by Frederick Preedy. Very capable architect. Lesser known because although in his later life he did move to London, he still does most of his work outside of London. You see here, that's the organ chamber and probable choir vestry on that side, and that's that access stair that we saw from the inside. There's a few bits and pieces of the old church here. You've got here someone's coat of arms has been retained above the doorway. And I do wonder whether, some of that stone in that doorway is definitely medieval, so I do suspect that that doorway is reusing some medieval stone. And up there, I mean, that, I'm not sure why Victorians would do that, but I do know why it would be done in the Middle Ages, so that may be original. Well, certainly some of the stone has been reused, retained, because again, you're rebuilding the church, you don't need to have just completely new stonework. And here, and this window is obviously definitely Victorian, and so is that one, and it doesn't match the one on the other side, and that tells me the one on the other side is indeed medieval. And around here again, but you can see how different the stonework is between the tower, this 15th century tower, and this 19th century nave and everything else. Different quarries, but also a different sort of aesthetic. And also, again, that tower is very, very posh. That's very, very high quality stonework. And we saw from the photographs inside that the medieval church, when it was demolished, the walls were rendered, and that suggests it's rubble covered with render. During the rebuilding they found this. This is a stone coffin. Obviously no body in it now, but medieval stone coffin with its lid. The lid is carved. It's a coffin cover. It's obviously quite eroded now, but you can just about see the outline of a floriated cross. Round we go. Yes, all these windows here are clearly Victorian. That definitely indicates that one on the other side is medieval, because it's a totally different style. And here we have, look at this stonework here. Here's this really, really high quality masonry. They really have pushed the boat out for this. And before the rebuild, it would have looked rather odd. This much humbler church. See, that's the tower door, and there's a staircase above. A much humbler church, and this whacking great, posh, high status, high quality tower. There is the war memorial, and here we are round to this porch here. Now, and a yew tree, quite commonly found in churchyards, yew trees. And you can see here that this porch, some of the wood, of course, has been replaced. It's wood, but most of it hasn't been. Most of it is still medieval. And at the rebuilding, the decision was made, let's keep this porch. It's a good porch, it's in good condition, it's medieval, and so there we are. You can just see there in that window. It didn't go in the vestry, but obviously there's some bits of medieval glass in there, and of course, a substantial graveyard. It's tucked away a bit, but it is in the village here. So that is St John's in Crowle. And so there you have it, St John the Baptist, Crowle, this beautiful, say largely Victorian church on the footings, on the foundations of the medieval church, but they just wanted to make it a bit grander, a bit more in keeping with that magnificent tower. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.